Well, as we've been hearing from the people, Palestinian internal reconciliation remains a top priority for people across the West Bank and Gaza. But who are the political players that can really bring the factions together, unite them, and move the political process forward? Let's take a look at some of these players. Khalid Mish'al is Hamas's political head based in the Syrian capital, Damascus. But running operations on the ground in Gaza is Ismail Haniyeh, the deposed prime minister. Mahmoud Abbas is currently Palestinian president. His four-year term ended at the height of the war, according to Hamas, although the constitution remains unclear about that. Marwan Barghouti is currently being held in an Israeli jail for leading the second intifada, but continues to enjoy mass appeal on the Palestinian street. Salam Fayyad is the current prime minister. He's an independent, but was appointed by President Abbas following last year's attempted Gaza takeover. And finally, Munib al-Masri is a prominent businessman who's held in high regards in the U.S. Could he be the individual to bring all of these factions together? Well, we are now joined by Al Jazeera senior political analyst in Washington, D.C., Marwan BISHARA. Thank you very much for joining us, Marwan. I wanted to start off by asking you, with all of this political internal division, who could possibly emerge to bring the Palestinian political house in order?
Well, it's going to depend, Ayman, as you well know, on who has the will among the various factions, especially among Hamas and Fatah today, to carry this on. But also it will have to do with the balance of power that emerged from the Arab Summit in Kuwait, and to see what mechanism those who donated the $2 billion would allow in order to see that reconstruction money or funds get to the people who need them. Now, the problem with this, Ayman, as you know, we at Al Jazeera, we were the only one to be able to cover this war on Gaza from both sides of the border. And so we saw two layers to this conflict. The one layer is Israel presumably trying to deter Hamas and crush Hamas. And the other layer that you reported on so well from Gaza, which is that of trying to deter those inhabitants of Gaza, those million refugees, those 750,000 children, those 1.5 million people living in that one big concentration camp, trying to deter them from supporting the likes of Hamas. So we ended up with this big, huge humanitarian problem, these two layers of the same war, trying to crush Hamas, but trying also to deter the Palestinian people. And now with this big humanitarian crisis at hand, the same politics that led to the war, unfortunately, Ayman, are leading to dealing with the reconstruction after the war. So the same politics that led to the war are leading to dealing with the humanitarian situation. So the same conflict that led to the war are now leading to the same way of dealing with aftermath, with after the war. We would hope that those who learned the lessons of the war would come, as you would say, to a certain understanding, and hence a certain person that, or a leader, or a joint leadership that would allow to move this thing forward.
Marwan, one of the things that we've been hearing from the people on the ground consistently day in and day out, and earlier in the show, is that they feel neglected by the international community. One, that they're not going to get the help they need immediately. We heard earlier someone asking for the international community to provide shelters. But two, a lack of accountability for Israel for what it has done, not just now, but previously as well. We also heard from Todd and Khan Yunis. Why does the international community drag its feet when it comes to this particular issue?
Well, this is the $64 million or billion-dollar question, Ayman. You would say that those who claim universal values, whether in Europe or the United States, would enforce those values in places like Gaza or in places like Israel, Palestine. Unfortunately, Ayman, the politics behind the policy in European capitals as well as here in Washington has been that they will support their ally Israel, even though their people, the public opinion, both in the United States and in Europe, as well as in the rest of the world, has been quite sympathetic to the plight of the Palestinian people, simply because they are people under occupation and they have suffered from that heavy bombardment and shelling for over 3 weeks. Nonetheless, as we move forward, and as Gaza was able to withstand the war on its people, I think it leaves very little chance now for people but to, especially in Western capitals, to have to deal head on with the idea that a people exist and a solution is needed, and that the humanitarian, and this is the most important message we can give from our medium as a journalism that covered that very humanitarian crisis there in the Gaza Strip is that the humanitarian relief cannot be conditional, that the humanitarian relief cannot be political, and that the universal values that we in journalism, as well presumably established in international law, should not be politicized in a cynical way. Those who supported the war cynically should not be allowed to dictate the aftermath also cynically by politicizing the humanitarian relief to Gaza. Humanitarian relief should start flowing to those who need it without waiting for the politics to be intact as they would like to see it.
Al Jazeera senior political analyst MARWAN BISHARA, thank you very much for joining us. Well, we're now joined by another guest from Israel, former ambassador to the United Nations, Mr. Danny Gillerman. Ambassador Gillerman, thank you very much for joining us. I want to start off with a point there just raised by MARWAN BISHARA, and that is the international community and particularly the United Nations. The Israeli ambassador to the UN Human Rights Council said that Palestinians should be under no illusions that Security Council resolutions will end their suffering and plight. As a person who represented your country at the United Nations, what kind of message do you think that sends to the Palestinian people that Israel does not abide by United Nations Security Council resolutions over the past several decades?
Israel has always abided by United Nations security resolutions and Security Council resolutions. If I remember correctly, it was the Hamas who continued shelling even after the ceasefire and refused to accept the United Nations Security Council resolution. But at the end of the day, I don't think it's up to the United Nations or to anyone else. It's up to the sides to make peace. We are ready to make peace. We're carrying out very, very deep and real and intensive talks with the Palestinian leadership that seeks peace. But at the same time, we have to confront the Palestinian faction which has been taken hostage by Hamas. And I think one of your guests described Gaza as a concentration camp. It is indeed a concentration camp, but it's one which was set up by Hamas, it's controlled by Hamas, which has created a hostage situation in Gaza and has put its people in peril and made them victims to its own bloody, brutal, and cynical designs and its ruthless attacks.
Well, Mr. Gillerman, let me just ask you this question really quickly. You make a point saying that you talk peace with the Palestinian leadership. Let's really look at that. Over the past year alone, Israeli settlements, illegal settlements under international law, have continued to expand to the same area where you say you're talking peace. Explain the rationale behind that illegal activity while you talk peace with the Palestinian Authority that you say is the legitimate representative of the Palestinian people. How do you explain that?
Israeli settlements have not been expanded, and there have been no new settlements built. Israel has abided completely by the agreement with the Palestinians and the international community. We have
Mr. Gillerman, that's,
deeper,
you know, the Israeli human rights
talks.
organizations, Mr. Gillerman, the Israeli human rights organizations, B'Tselem and others, monitor this very closely. The statistics speak for themselves. The U.S. Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice addressed the issue when she visited Jerusalem. Settlements have indeed expanded. Are you saying they are not expanding and that all these people are not reporting accurately what's happening on the ground in the occupied West Bank?
Look, the problem is not settlements. I mean, we can use every excuse we want. One day it's occupation, but then we leave Gaza and we keep getting rockets in return. Then it's settlements. I mean, I don't think we should go into all this blame game. I think we should look at reality and realize the problem is not settlements. The problem is reaching a settlement. And there is one part of the Palestinian people and the Palestinian leadership, led by President Mahmoud Abbas and Salam Fayyad, who wants to reach a settlement and live in peace. And there's another part led by Hamas, which wants only to destroy and kill and maim and is indiscriminately targeting kindergartens and schools in Israeli towns and villages. This is a situation which no other country in the world would sustain. We lived under it for 8 years, and one day we decided we could not take it any longer. And what has happened in Gaza is a direct result of that. The violence could stop immediately, and peace can prevail immediately once Hamas decides that it doesn't want to shell Israeli cities and kill Israelis anymore. The minute that stops, we can have peace in 1 minute. That's what it's all about.
Mr. Gillerman, thank you very much for joining us and sharing your thoughts with us on this particular occasion. Well, we can now cross over to Gaza City, not too far away from where we are, and be joined by Al Jazeera's Mike HANNA. Mike?
Well, Ayman, as night falls here in Gaza City, it appears that much of the area has electricity, a very rare occasion. All the telephones are working as an approach to what here is a normal situation continues. But the Israelis have withdrawn. They maintain their blockade, all the borders tightly sealed. And in the course of the day, even fishing boats unable to travel more than 50 meters out of the harbor without receiving a warning salvo of fire from the Israeli gunships. But much moving on the political front, brewing discussion among Palestinians, as we've heard through the course of this past hour, talks about reconciliation. And some believe that the Israeli invasion of Gaza helped energize the drive towards Palestinian unification.
It's not the first time that Hamas passed some painful times, but I think they became more stronger and stronger. So if Israel think that by using military means that they can destroy any Palestinian faction, not only Hamas, they are sleeping in the other world, because really we are in touch with our people, we are mixed with our people, so there is no any possibility to weaken Hamas or to weaken a Palestinian faction.
Most Palestinians I've spoken to insist that the way forward now is unity among the Palestinian people. Unity in particular between Hamas and Fatah. Are there moves now to achieve a reconciliation between these parties?
Look, we think that reconciliation is our priority. We think this is very important for us. We think that the splitting is a disaster for the Palestinian people. We have to put end for this splitting. So I hope that after what happened in Arabic summits and also after the war, that we have to go on to realize the unity and reconciliation on the ground, because I think it will support Hamas, it will support the Palestinian project, it will support our issue and our case. So I hope that the leaders of Hamas and Fatah can move on very quickly in order to sit on the negotiation table.
Well, there we hear from Hamas spokesman, and one of the difficulties in these moves towards reconciliation, the fact that it's not just divisions between the factions, but divisions within the factions themselves. The process going on at the moment is each faction reconciling those various opinions within it, able to move towards joint talks with the opposing factions. A complex and very complicated process, given the degree of division that had occurred between the Palestinian political factions in recent years, division that resulted in near civil war on occasion. We've heard in the course of the past hour as well reference to a poll that has just been published, highly respected poll by the East Consultancy, produced on a monthly basis in the West Bank and Gaza, and it bears a closer look in terms of what the precise figures they are producing at the moment. A very interesting figure is that 70% of those in Gaza in the wake of the war support a peace treaty with Israel. That is a very high figure. We heard as well the fact that support for all Palestinian factions has dropped. The precise figures: 26% support Fatah, 16% support Hamas, 52% support nobody at all. And the final figure is that 82% of those polled see Palestinian unity as an absolute priority in the days to come. Back to you, Ayman.
Well, that's it from here in the Gaza Strip, a land in ruins following 22 days of war and 18-month siege. We will be following the story in the weeks and months ahead. But for now, thank you for watching. Stay tuned.